each and every one of us has our own unique prescription for what we require in order to feel better. And the missing link was the needs, right? And looping our needs into how we're caring for ourselves, how we are relating to ourselves, what we're asking for in our relationships allows us to be present in it, right? It allows for care that is responsive and not prescriptive.
Hello, hello, beautiful souls on the other side of this podcast. Welcome to another amazing, life-changing episode of Vibin It. We are here today, as always, to help you live your best life, accomplish your dreams, align your energy, remove your blockages, all that jazz. So welcome if you're new. Welcome if you're a Vibin It VIP. We love you so much. And thanks for joining us for another week of the show. Today, we have a beautiful, beautiful guest by the name of Mara, not Marl. I was combining your last name and your first name. Mara Glatzel, like pretzel. And she's beautiful, and she has beautiful hair and a beautiful vibe. And whoever's watching on Patreon, I'm really excited for you to see us in action. And she's the author of a book called Needy, which I haven't even read yet, and I already know that it applies to me and many people listening. So Mara, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast to talk about this muy importante topic.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, welcome, welcome.
Mara. Oh gosh.
Yes.
The first thing I say and I get like stuff in my throat. Hey, Mara, I'm so happy to be with you today. As always, we just love all of our guests. And this one is particularly interesting and something we haven't really attacked. It's a word, attacked directly, like just talking about the idea of having and honoring needs. I mean, you wrote a whole book about it. So I want to take a second and kind of talk about how you got into this particular area. What made you kind of light up around this idea of needs? It sounds so simple, but I know it isn't. It's so layered and so complex and so out of the norm for most people because it's just simply not what we're taught to do. And I was just having a conversation with my husband about this morning, which is very funny. But I want to talk about your journey and how you kind of got into this specific beautiful area.
Yeah. So I had been doing coaching and teaching in self-care realms for like 10 years, quite a period of time. And that work was really rich and really fruitful. But there was always something about self-care that didn't click for me. And, I think that we're sold this idea of self-care, which is oftentimes really beautiful and seems like it's going to feel good, but misses the mark. And we have these models that are prescriptive in nature. They say, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you're going to feel better. And so often I was working with clients who didn't feel better. It wasn't the thing. And they were becoming disenchanted with the concept of self-care to begin with, because they would say, well, I'm throwing all this energy at it and I'm not feeling any better. So why bother? And for me, I had to take some time to really think about what was happening in there. And each and every one of us has our own unique prescription for what we require in order to feel better. And the missing link was the needs, right? And looping our needs into how we're caring for ourselves, how we are relating to ourselves, what we're asking for in our relationships allows us to be present in it, right? It allows for care that is responsive and not prescriptive. And so as my work deepened in that way, I realized that we don't have a vocabulary for what is even possible to need. And that's a stumbling block because we might say, well, what do I need? But we don't even know what's on the table. We don't even know what we're allowed to ask for. And so this book was born out of work that I was doing with my clients and in online classes around figuring out what that vocabulary is, figuring out what the tools are that enable you to build a relationship first with yourself so that you can bring more of yourself to your work, to your external relationships, to, every facet of your life. And, like all teachers, I presume, good teachers, I presume, this is what I had to learn
Yeah.
myself. This,
Yeah.
I wasn't raised with an understanding of what I needed. I was raised certainly with an understanding of needing too much. And also, during the 90s, not all of the everything, all of the cultural examples that you were absorbing, if you were me, were pointing you towards this direction of don't be needy. Don't
Yeah.
be that. That's the thing none of us want to be. And so, in order to avoid that neediness, we've gone as a culture so far to the opposite side that we aren't in connection with our needs by and large. And that is a huge disconnect for, we want to be living these rich and satisfying lives. But if we don't have a working relationship with ourselves, we don't have any data to build that life on.
Yeah, this is so juicy. So for I want to add something to this conversation too, because I feel like where a lot of people go wrong when they're starting to like want to take better care of themselves or love themselves more is that there's a lot of teachers out there basically insinuating that you should be an island unto yourself and that self-love and self-care is all about you doing everything for you and that you should be able to be totally self-sufficient, not need anybody, complete all your needs for yourself by yourself, and that just simply obviously isn't true. And for myself as a self-love advocate and teacher, I'm always trying not to just imply that, right? You do need to give things to yourself and also you need to ask for things that you need, but like how can you ask if you don't know what they are, like how you said. So I think it's great that you're creating almost like in the book, do you share like a list of words that we can need or like things that are I think that's really, really a tangible, practical way to figure it out because a lot of people they don't know what they need. And usually the way that we find out what we need is by not having it, right? And then suffering in the absence of that need. We're like, oh, why can't I be happy? Why can't I be thriving? And it's like, well, it's really hard to be happy and thriving if your basic needs aren't getting met. And that's where we need to troubleshoot so that we can step into that happiness, that fulfillment, those really harmonious, compatible relationships. And I'm sure a lot of this topic, this conversation is going to be about relationships and relating because that's how we get a lot of our needs met. And in today's society, I feel like there's so much emphasis on, attraction and not enough on compatibility. And in order to figure out who you're compatible with, whether it's a friend or a business partner or a romantic partner, you have to know your needs and their needs. And then you can assess if the needs blend harmoniously and you are happy to meet each other's needs or not. So I'm really glad that you're teaching about this because it is like monumental.
Thank you. Yeah. So, much of the book, first of all, I'll say it takes you through from safety to celebration, 9 different needs and the many variations that exist where basically we all share needs and also experience that need in our own particular way. So we may all share the need for safety. We certainly do share the need for belonging, but how we might experience that need is based on our own lived experience, our personalities, our attachment styles, all of these things. And so knowing the overarching framework of what's possible to need is important. And also knowing ourselves in context is important. And in my book, I really take a stand for radical self-responsibility, which means that you are responsible for your needs.
Yeah.
And that does not mean that you're responsible for meeting all of your needs by yourself all of the time, but you are responsible for asking for what you need out loud and in the presence of the people in your life. You're responsible for tending to your needs as if they matter. You're still responsible for your needs if other people don't have the capacity to meet you in those needs. And so that self-responsibility piece is really important. And how we pull that apart from hyper individualism is also really important, because this isn't saying that you don't need anyone, but that your relationships require you to be as emotionally honest as possible for the vitality of that relationship.
Yeah, this is fun because I'm remembering as you talked about your childhood and like being seen as, or probably getting the message that, oh, I'm too needy. My message was you can't do anything for me. And so I did actually take on the mantle of like, I apparently I'm supposed to do this all myself, and that's fine. And so I kind of grew up, and even in my early adulthood, I got to do it myself. I got to do it myself because I can't count on you guys. I can't count on anybody. And I understand. I have a dual understanding about this, which is one, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have that self, I guess, resilience and the ability to do it myself. And two, I it's now almost like a weakness. What was my strength or what I saw as a strength is now I'm like learning is a weakness, because my husband and I have the same conversation, constructive conversation all the time, which is just tell me what you need. I'm like, but you're just supposed to know. Why do I don't want to tell you. I don't want to ask. I just want you to do it. So I'm finding myself, and I'm praying and hoping that other people will relate to this, that it does become a weakness, and we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to carry it all. And yeah, it can be a strength, I guess, in some situations, but if we're not keeping it in check and if we're not actually growing beyond that, it then becomes toxic or a weakness, and something that I don't want. Like, I want to be able to ask my kid, I want them to be able to ask me what they, or tell me what they need. I want to be able to ask for what I need. And I am, to be clear, a lot better than I was. And I'm getting better every day. But I think that it does become something that you really need to look at. And it's not supposed to be that way, because for the longest time, I thought it was supposed to be that way. So I think that your book is so important for people like me who maybe grew up without the best kind of environment to know that you could do that. I want to talk a little bit about the title, because I know there's a lot there, and I want to dig into it. So your book is called Needy, which some people might look at and be like, what the heck is this book about? But I want you to really explain like the reason for this word, because it's a very particular word, and why it's so important that it's called needy.
Yeah, so I love the word needy. It is delightfully polarizing.
Yeah.
It makes people feel things.
It does.
And I like to say that if it makes you feel things, that's a surefire way to know that this book is for you,
Yes.
right? And I'm a Pisces. I have a really expansive imagination, and the reclamation and redefinition of words is something that's really important to me and is a really powerful concept. And over the last couple of years, I've been working with the word needy. It's also the name of my podcast, and have been really thinking about what neediness is, right? And how that feeling of neediness is a desire to matter, a desire to be seen, to be known, and to have your needs prioritized and met. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. And in fact, similar to a kind of binge and restrict cycle in dieting, you see this thing that happens when we pretend that we don't have any needs. Then all of a sudden we're having like way too many needs all at one time. They're sort of spilling over, usually around something that's not kind of a minor thing, but you're having a big reaction to it. And that the needs aren't the problem. Your needs are vital information for you about how to live, about what's in alignment for you, about how to thrive in your relationships. This information is so, so important. And yet, that feeling of not wanting to be too much, not wanting to be a burden or be a drain, that hungry ghost feeling that we're socialized into. I mean, I'm sure we can all conjure an image of that neediness.
Yeah.
But there are so many problems with it, right? There are patriarchal problems with it. It is always women who are needy. It is rarely men
Mhm.
who are needy. The very presence of feelings is often seen as this neediness. And there are so many inherent problems with that image of neediness that we carry. And so I think it's really important to begin to pull it apart and think about how we might reclaim it. Now, I don't need people running forward from this book saying, I'm needy. And I mean, I'm happy to say, that I'm very needy and that's a reality about me. But making peace with the word,
Yeah.
understanding why we cringe when we hear it, and understanding what it might look like to allow ourselves to have needs is such of vital importance to our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I want to double down on what I think is the theme of that in the statement of your needs are not the problem,
They're the
but
solution.
right. When we're kind of being called needy, it is completely on the person who's not willing to meet your needs, not on you, right? It's like you need to find that person who is compatible with those needs and who can give you what you need at the same time that you're giving yourself what you need, and obviously not relying on them completely. It brings to mind, and this may not connect for some people, but it brings to mind that statement of like, oh, she's got daddy issues. Okay, but and we don't ever think of, oh, she's got daddy issues, whatever. Like I grew up with that word, not about me, but like we all grew up with that phrase of like, oh, she's got daddy issues, there must be something wrong with her. But when you sit down and really think about that, that's not her, that's her dad. Like what are we
Mhm.
doing? Why are we doing this to women? Like what why are we like what is the word, uh chastising them for something they had no control over? And in the same way, we say the word needy without thinking about what it really means, or without even thinking about what it means for ourselves. Like there's something within us that is not being met. What the
Mm.
heck is wrong with that? Like,
Yeah.
when did we make that a bad thing? That's so silly to me. We
Hmm.
don't think about these things.
Yeah, it's similar with mommy issues too, I think. It's like that desire to be parented,
Mm,
that desire to be prioritized and cared for, and to belong and to be loved unconditionally. And how many of us ache for that.
yeah.
And why is that a bad thing? Why is that this weakness or this thing to be embarrassed about? When the reality is, we are a hypersocial species. We all have a need for belonging. We all have a need for safety. And we all have particular conditions for what it looks like to have those needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Lindsay, to your point, to give a real life example, if I had $1 for every time one of my exes labeled me as needy, well, I
Yeah.
probably only have like $3. But these are significant relationships for me.
Don't make that number too high now.
Big dollars.
3 really big dollars. But like people would label me needy and I would feel so sad because I knew like I was giving everything to them. They were giving nothing to me. And really it was just like not the best relationship for me and it was not compatible at all. And these people weren't even available to meet my
Yeah.
needs. Even if they wanted to, they just really could not at all because they had their whole own issues and they were pouring from an empty cup, so to speak. So as
Yeah.
soon as I read the title of your book, I was like, I understand wholeheartedly and completely exactly what she's trying to do by reclaiming this word because it can be a really hurtful word. And I always then internalized that and made it mean that I'm too much until I
That word
learned,
too much. You're too much is
yeah.
so similar to like, where's your next book? Number 2 should be called Too Much, because that's another one we need to take back. Go
Yeah.
find less. That's what I say.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, too much for that person.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, those couple people, those $3. But in reality, like I'm not too much for my fiance now. In the beginning,
Yeah.
if I was crying or if I was having like some sort of needy moment, I would be like, oh my God, am I needy? Am I too much? And he would just look at me and be like, no, you're a person. Like everyone's allowed to cry. Everyone's allowed to have feelings. Like I'm happy to hold space for you and give you a hug if that's what you need. And that was the first time I experienced being in a compatible enough relationship where the person was happy to meet my needs and make me
Mm.
feel belonging. And obviously that's like why we're about to get married. But it's so important just to speak on this because I think there's a lot of people out there like me who feel that they are too much, they're too needy, they're
See,
asking for too much, they're too whatever, and it's just not it.
Kelsey, this is yet another example of how we are complete opposites and yet so compatible because we got the one end of the spectrum over here where could not that it's you necessarily, but that it could be seen as like looking to someone else to fulfill your needs, maybe too much, being called too much. And then you have the other side who's like, don't ever try to come near me. Like just this fiercely independent to the point where it's not okay to actually ask for help or to have your needs be met by somebody else. So I think that we are again so compatible and just so opposite. Like we
I
both
know.
have
We
the
are.
complete extreme, but we're both I think we both because I know your journey, Kels. We've known each other for a long time. And I know for myself, like I think if we started at that complete end of the spectrum, I think we've both now been so good about coming more to center, more to that healthy balance of yes, meet my own needs and ask for help when you need it. And I think that that's so important to find that balance, within yourself. Mara, can we talk about that like
Mhm.
that gray area or that sweet spot where you have both?
Yeah, so, just to put that into context, I think that when we experience feedback about our needs during our upbringing, which,
Mm.
we're all experiencing all the time. I have two kids, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And when my oldest child was born, I was really surprised to sit with that feeling of, I so wanted to be the kind of mother that was there for her and everything that she needed and to provide only positive feedback when she expressed her needs. And you're also a human. So sometimes you're really tired or really overwhelmed, or you're
Yeah.
learning how to breastfeed a baby and you just gave birth. It's like all of these things are going on. And I was hyper aware of how even under the best circumstances, misunderstandings happen around needs.
Yep.
And when those misunderstandings are happening, or when we're receiving messages about what it means to have needs, and all families kind of deal with this differently depending on the resources that are available, both internal and external, and the amount of energy and the family configuration, all of that. As we're receiving that feedback, we generally go in one of two ways, right? And that's in the needs, don't know them, hyper independent, or it is so acutely important to me that you see me and you understand what I need,
Mhm.
that I maybe have a more of a voracious drive for that than other people, because I don't feel safe unless that I'm like always looking, always looking, always looking. So that hyper seeking, or really turning that part of ourselves off. And, sometimes we turn that part of ourselves off because that's how we learned how to take care of our caregivers, right? We didn't want to burden them with our needs. Or, maybe we're trying to get that care that we didn't get when we were kids, or we didn't get in our early relationships. And so we're always seeking. And so we come by it honestly. And that's really important to understand wherever it is that you are on the spectrum right now. We're all a product of our experiences. And so knowing that and honoring that and really understanding that I am a human, humans have needs, your needs are a fact and not a flaw. And whether you feel drawn towards them or you feel, kind of repelled away from them, the presence of those needs is not a problem for you. And learning how to be in relationship with yourself and be in relationship with your needs requires understanding. For me, I am a super seeker. I, want to, way more so than many people, want to be seen, want to be known, want to be cared for. I have a system that is super sensitive and highly vigilant, looking for moments where I'm not seen, not cared for, not understood, and, always wanting to make sure, always explaining. My natural inclination is to explain your face off.
Yeah.
It looks like you're not understanding, I'm going to tell you again. I'm going to tell you in a different way. I'm going to tell you again and again and again.
This is so funny. This sounds like my husband. I love you, babe. It really does. Like
Well,
he has
let me
expressed
tell
that
you.
multiple times, and it would make sense that we got
We
together.
often attract. And this is the same with me and my partner. It's the same. And, I'm way on the needs side, and my partner, Cookie, is like, what does that even mean when you say, what do you need? What could I possibly need from you? I got it covered.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and learning how to come into that gray zone in the middle is so important. Just this morning, and this is something that we've been working on, I was feeling very tender about something that my partner was feeling very businesslike about.
I love this
And
phrasing. I'm going to assimilate it now. Okay, keep going.
And I was getting a little bit fraught about that. And they looked at me and they said, okay, when we talk about this later, let's make a promise. I will be a little bit less businesslike about this if you are willing to be a little bit less tender about it, which was so sweet. It was really sweet. Just having that understanding of like, I'm up here, you're down here, and we're always kind of striving to meet in the middle. And really understanding how, me not being quite so vigilant and giving my partner more space is an act of love. They really need that. And for me, I really want to take care of my partner. So it is meaningful for me when they say, hey, this is something that you could do to support me. They don't want to put me out. They don't want to, become vulnerable in front of me, but how meaningful it is to me for them to give me those opportunities to care. So, coming into that middle point, and it's a work in progress, but I think the foundation of that has to be so much compassion for yourself and so much understanding that this is vulnerable work, and we have to give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
1,000,000,000%. A to the man, sister.
Yeah, mic drop. Don't drop it. It's probably expensive, but that's a mic drop moment right there. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Most of the misunderstandings do come from like my husband just not feeling like I'm hearing him, but he's like, but do you understand? And I'm like, yeah, way businesslike. And when you said that, I was like, 100%. That sounds exactly like us. So I love this idea of like always seeking to come to the middle. And I think that's a theme that every marriage should be, or partnership should be focused on, is just, it's not all or nothing. It can't be you just come to my side all the time, or fine, I'll just go to your side all the time. I'll just always understand you, but I don't. It cannot. So always seeking for opportunities to come to that middle is just there's no downside, because you both understand each other better. You feel closer. It elevates the relationship because you both feel safe. And I just think I'm just such an advocate for that. And and not in necessarily in practice, I am getting better, but in the idea of like, it just sounds, yeah, of course that's what needs to happen. And I do it as much as possible. But you're absolutely right when you talk about parenting and just in partnerships. Like, we all come into this with the best of intentions, don't we? And we all also have all of our triggers and all of our stuff that we're coming in, all of our knee-jerk reactions that we might not even know existed until the moment cropped up, and you're like, oh, that's a thing I need to look at. Yeah, intentions, man.
That was a really beautiful example. I'm glad you shared that, because it just makes it like so much more practical. And I want to get into, I want to ask you, what are some of the needs that people are surprised to find out that they need, or like common ones that people are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I needed that. But before we get into that, I wanted to add a point to something you said way earlier. Well, also really just building the case for why you should own your needs, which we've been doing this whole time. But something that I've noticed too is like when people don't own their needs, or they don't consciously know their needs, your needs are going to get met one way or another.
Yeah.
They're going to get met consciously and in a beneficial way, or they're going to get met subconsciously in probably a manipulative way. So
or self-destructive.
Yeah, a lot of more narcissistic people or people with personality disorders or just people who are manipulative in general, they don't know how to get their needs met. They don't know how to ask. They don't know how to go directly for what they need and what they want. So they have to do it in covert ways, right? Because you only have really one option when it comes to your needs, and that's for them to get met or suffer greatly, right? So I think it's important too to build the case not just for why it's so beneficial, but why when you don't do it, it can be so detrimental and you can be not only hurting yourself but others too by not claiming your needs in a healthy conscious way, going for them directly,
Mhm.
because you're gonna go for them one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I answer your question, I do want to say that I think, one thing that is so important to keep in mind is that we're all trying to get our needs met. And that when we have the belief, like Lindsay said earlier, that our partner should just know what we need, or furthermore, that that's what it means to be loved, right? That love means, you know what I need, and I don't have to say a word. Then, if that person doesn't just know, because we're not mind readers, nobody just knows what you need. Um, when that person doesn't just know that, then they don't love you and that they don't understand you, and how quickly that plays out, and how we are so socialized to believe that if we are good enough, people will just know, people will see us as worthy of having needs and just know what we need. And so we get stuck in this spiral of working, 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 trying to earn our worth, trying to earn our needs,
Kelsey,
showing.
how easy is it for me to sit down?
Not easy.
You
Yeah.
are speaking. You just like you know me. What's going on?
Well, and trying to show other people what we need through our actions, hoping that they'll just kind of like mimic it back to us, instead of asking for it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, when we are not being explicit about what we need, there is just nothing but room for misunderstanding.
Right.
And there is so much that happens in that misunderstanding, but namely, you're not getting your needs met. And I have so many clients who come to me in this place of, I feel unappreciated, unvalued by the people in my life. Nobody knows what I need. Nobody's giving me what I need. I am not asking for what I need,
By the
especially
way.
not from myself or anyone else. Um, but, that piece of, usually these people are also highly sensitive to what other people need, which is a trauma response, right? Many of us grow up to be hyper aware of what other people need. And so we may believe, I know what everyone else needs, and it is my job to know what everyone else needs. It keeps me safe to know what everyone else needs before they know it. And everyone else does the same. And they just are ignoring me or not caring if they're not, acting on that data. So, first of all, not everybody knows. Second of all, your actual job is to ask for what you need. And, I think when we start pulling these apart, it really comes to the core of how we conduct ourselves in our relationships and the boundaries that we have with ourselves about what is and what isn't our responsibility.
Yeah.
And when we're seeking to have healthier relationships with other people, you can never go wrong with expressing things out loud and encouraging the people in your life to express things out loud too, and practicing for small things.
Hey there, we hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for High Vibin It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts, or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, Hi Vibin It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.